And welcome to the Mudisa Network. Tonight, the parliamentarian at the forefront of the land hearings talks about his experience interacting with the communities. Vincent Smith joins the network. Later on, we love them on stage, we love them on TV. Soapy star and actor Florence Masebe talks about the bright lights and the dark side of entertainment. Welcome, and of course you can take part in our conversations here on the program by joining us. Use the hashtag the Mudisa Network on Twitter. The laws of South Africa are passed or amended by the members of parliament in line with our constitution. The MPs, otherwise called lawmakers in other democracies, are also expected to perform other functions which include holding the government, and that is the cabinet ministers and their departments and agencies, to account. Most of the work of parliamentarians takes place away from the public eye in the portfolio committees, and the revelations of widespread corruption under the President Jacob Zuma put this work under the spotlight. One such parliamentarian is Vincent Smith, who did an excellent job of chairing the hearings into the maladministration of the SABC. Most recently, he has been chairing the public hearings on land expropriation. And he joins us to discuss his work and share his thoughts on the political developments in the country. Mr. Smith, honorable member, pleasure to have you with us here.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Well, I find that very fascinating that in Parliament, it doesn't matter how many interruptions that come about between yourselves as colleagues, opposition parties, you still refer to each other as honorable member, even though some of the things that are said are not so honorable after all.
I agree.
So, but as I said, am I correct to say most of the work of Parliament we don't get to see, and we only see it when you do something that is high profile, like in the portfolio committees?
No, you're correct, absolutely correct. The engine room of Parliament is actually the committees.
Yeah.
And work in the committees is not very sexy.
Yeah.
So those things don't tend to hit the media headlines and so on. Without portfolio committee work, Parliament will not exist. So you're right. Most of the work is done behind the scenes, so to say.
I will talk about the behind the scenes work, but let's talk about yourself becoming member of Parliament, right? And I learn you represent or serve at least 9 communities in Gauteng.
I do. I became a member of Parliament in 1999. My constituencies initially was El Rado Park, Annandale, then it was moved to Westbury, Nuclear, Bosmont, and I've now been moved to the Deep South, which is the Annandale, Orange Farm type of area. So yes, those are my constituencies.
And you don't serve Yesterers and the others anymore?
Well, those I did during the election time.
Yeah.
During the election time, I worked throughout the province in the what is so-called the coloured communities.
Yeah.
So every coloured community in Gauteng was a responsibility that I had to go and service, but that was just for election work.
And I read somewhere that you are not so comfortable with that definition or terminology of coloured. Why?
Well, I don't understand what is this thing that is coloured.
Yeah.
And I don't regard myself as a coloured MP. But simply put, my mother is as African can be. And my father is as coloured can be. So if I'm a coloured MP, I deny my mother's side of the family. If I'm an African MP, I deny my colour. I'm just an MP.
Yeah,
well, and it serves the people. So, no, I don't identify with this coloured concept.
I don't want to wade into that, but I share your sentiments, and I'll explain off the record why. It's got nothing to do with me. It's just the way I see it. But anyway, your comments now, we've got this commission of inquiry into corruption, right? What's your view of what's developing at the Zondo Commission?
I have not been following it very closely, but I think it's something that has to be done. We had to, at some point, make it very clear to South Africans that corruption doesn't pay. People had been doing it with impunity for a long time. The PFMA and other laws that were in place were not implemented. And I do think that we are beginning to turn the corner, and we must all welcome the fact that we are now serious about dealing with corruption, maladministration, because after all, we're dealing with taxpayers' money.
Yeah, well, no, again, many people will agree with you. And that's how many more people got to know about you when you got involved as the chairperson of the ad hoc committee that investigated the SABC, did you anticipate that you were going to uncover the extent of the rot that you did?
No, we never anticipated it. We just knew that we had to do something to stop the downward spiral. And not in our wildest dreams did we anticipate picking up what we've picked up. But through the interviews of past and present employees at the time, it became very apparent that things were very wrong at the SABC. And we tried our best to be impartial and to do what we thought was good for SABC, but also what was good for the country.
How did you manage to do that? Because frankly, you know, you can tell which side the MPs are on, which organization they represent. But in the case of the work of the ad hoc committee, you were, as a collective, non-partisan, and it came across that you definitely were working for South Africa's interests and not for the political party interests.
At the time, Tim, Parliament had been taken a serious beating, that as Parliament we were not serious about our work, and the interest, or not interest, but the confidence that South Africans had in Parliament was at its lowest. So we had no choice but to begin to restore the confidence that South Africans had in Parliament, and the only way you can do that is to do your work without fear and favour, and I think we did our best. And all political parties came to the party, fortunately, and we worked as Parliament as opposed to political parties for narrow party interests, and I think it worked out for the better.
I will tell you, as much as the investigation was into the affairs of the SABC, and I must say this with all the seriousness that I can put together, it also was entertaining. You were cool and calm under pressure, with the walkouts being staged, and some of the evidence presented or the testimony given was laughable, really, and was done in a very entertaining way. I hope you don't mind. But you managed to keep things together. I remember your interaction with your colleagues on the way the prof, the chairperson of the SABC, was conducting himself. So what was going through your mind when you were watching all of the stuff that was happening before you?
Tim, I half expected it. When we understood the rot that was in the SABC, we expected that people will try and defend themselves. It was the first time, it was uncharted waters. I don't think that ever happened in South Africa, that there was that kind of an inquiry. So we expected people to be defensive, and we had to be professional, we had to be transparent. We also knew that the media and also South Africans were watching us with an eagle eye. So we had to ensure that at all times we were fair, we were transparent, and that we were serious about our job. And the professionalism, I think, was due to everybody in that committee, from the members of Parliament even to the backroom staff. We tried our best.
So how did you go about establishing the line of questioning that you adopted?
I don't know how we did it, Tim. There was no formula. We just agreed that these are the focus areas, and we allowed all parliamentarians the freedom to ask questions as they saw it fit. There was no rehearsal, which party should say what or which individual should say what. The only thing that we regulated was the time. You've got 3 minutes to ask your questions or 5 minutes to ask your questions, but the rest people did as they saw fit, and that formula worked in the end.
Which of the people who appeared before the committee are still in your mind at this time that you found very interesting as individuals or personalities? Well, I can tell you mine.
No, I'm thinking about it because I don't want to, I don't know. I think these are people that are still out there, their families. But yes, I think a few come to mind, but Tim, I'd rather at this point not identify them. I still remember them very, very vividly.
Yes. Yeah, well, I can tell you, I remember Prof. Mbulaini Maguve, and the extent to which you were, I think, very maybe sympathetic and understanding of his situation. And you said something, though, about him. You said, to your mind, you thought he was being used by others. You still stick by that. Was that your view?
I stick by that. I think somebody who's a professor should have, I think, known better. And the fact that he stayed when everybody else had jumped ship to me was an indication that somehow or the other he was doing it against his will. I don't believe that the professor was unaware of the things that were happening, as he had said in the interview. So I do think that he was protecting certain interests. But at the end, unfortunately, I think that he was the biggest casualty.
And the impressions about the institution, a very important institution, the SABC, to South Africans. Majority of people rely on it for both entertainment and information. And on top of it, actually, it's a platform for cultural expression, anyway, of South Africa. So you could say it's the face of South Africa. It's the everything that we do as a people, it's our cultural expression, is through the SABC. But when you listen to everything that was being said, how did that make you feel?
You know, Tim, as you're correctly saying, that institution was supposed to be an institution of learning, of educating people and entertainment. And I think that many people at the SABC had good intentions. I do think there were a few people that whose intentions were not in line with what the mission was of the SABC. I mean, I don't know that somebody could go and indicate that you should only give good news stories as opposed to giving the truth. You'll recall how the SABC 8, as they were called at the time, were harassed for trying to do their work. So it had to be addressed, it had to be stopped, and I think that it went a long way into stopping it. I'm hoping that the SABC today is a better SABC than what it was when we did the inquiry 2 years ago.
Well, it looks like, you know, there are improvements there, and I'm sure you've heard from people as well, and yourself, having watched here and there, you feel a bit satisfied that you contributed to improving the situation there.
I think we did. I think Parliament contributed. I think everybody in that ad hoc committee can be satisfied that our work bore fruit and continues to bear fruit in terms of the health of the SABC, both financially and also just in terms of their content. I think it's a better place now.
And were you at any time told not to ask certain questions by, let's say, cabinet ministers or even the president at the time, President Jacob Zuma?
No, we were not.
There's no time when
there
you were
was
told?
no time that the leadership of the ANC or the leadership of cabinet told us that we're going too far or we're not doing our work properly. We did our work without fear and favor. We did our work without any influence. And I think every member of that committee from all political parties will tell you that it was us and us alone, not being directed from anybody.
And my guest is the Honourable Member of Parliament, Vincent Smith, and we probed the time that he chaired the ad hoc committee that investigated the SABC. And as I indicated to him, I do remember specific moments of the interactions that he had with some of the people who appeared before him. We'll continue our conversation with him in a moment.